What it do, cucks? It's your boy once again, and it's time for another episode of Hater Outdoors. It's become a Monday night tradition where the hater goes to the parking lot and watches Raw on his phone as I chain smoke, because by this time, my fiance is asleep and I'm a night owl and I do it for the peoples. So, without any further ado, let's get to this Raw review, but let's do one thing a little bit differently. Unlike other reviews where I reveal the score at the end, I think there's no secret that this episode was a 0 out of 10. This was one of the worst episodes of Raw I've ever seen in my life. And one thing that I couldn't stop thinking about this entire time was, this has to be a joke. Every segment had to be some sort of joke. So with that in mind, with that frame in mind, let's get to it. First segment, Rhea Ripley comes out and she's angry as usual. Rhea Ripley sucks. She's one of those wrestlers, I used to think she was cool, but she's one of those wrestlers that pretty much gets these accolades and gets this respect that she, in my opinion, hasn't earned, right? She's an unstable character. I don't mean that in that her character is that she's an unstable woman. She is an unstable and inconsistent character. And the inconsistency was clear throughout this whole episode. She made like 100 appearances, so we're gonna talk about that here and there. She comes out and basically says she wants to beat up Liv Morgan again and take her title. We already knew this, so there was no point in her coming out and saying it, right? I guess some of the dumber fans might think, well, she got her revenge and that's it, it's over, right? Even though that wasn't going to happen. Dominic comes out and says Liv Morgan isn't here because she's still nursing her wounds. Basically, she says to Dominic, cállate, estúpido, which means shut it, stupid. And Dominic just does what he does, which is pretty good, you know what I mean? It's still good. Basically, like the crowd boos him and he's like, let me speak, and then he says it in Spanish afterwards, you know what I mean? So basically Dominic says like, Liv wants to fight you too, blah, blah, blah. Liv apparently was there the whole time. She attacks Rhea, right? After all this shit that Rhea talked, basically, she gets pushed by Liv and gets her leg caught up in the ropes, and basically her leg is injured now. That's the story, you know what I mean? Maybe that's the excuse that we're gonna get for when Liv beats Rhea Ripley again. But basically, after talking all this shit and being like angry and smiling like a psychopath, now all of a sudden, Rhea Ripley is angry like a psychopath, right? Like complete shift in emotions because she got her ass kicked. Well, you called her out and you got your ass beat, right? This reminds me a lot of Roman Reigns in the sense that, like, he has this kind of like shit-talking phase, even though Roman doesn't talk, but he has this presence, this aura, as the kids will say, where he's like, I'm here to kick ass. Then he gets his ass kicked, and then he's pissed off. You know what I mean? Same thing with her. Basically, she's hurt. Damian Priest has to come and save her ass before Liv Morgan ends her career. So basically, in other words, all the shit that Rhea Ripley talked, she couldn't back it up. That's what I got out of this segment. She couldn't back it up. Yeah, Dominic was there, but Dominic is presented as a cuck. That's another thing that I don't like, by the way. The presentation of Dominic as this guy that's afraid of Rhea Ripley, right? At the end of the day, I get it. Rhea Ripley is a big broad, right? And Dominic is a scrawny dude. But nevertheless, you need to have some logic behind this, The dynamic is obviously very similar to that of Eddie Guerrero in China. The entire underpinnings of the China-Eddie Guerrero relationship was basically that Eddie Guerrero wasn't man enough for China in many ways because he's like 5'5" and she's like 6 foot, right? And that was the comedy angle of it. But when the time came, and Eddie Guerrero being one of the GOATs, right? He shifted from like the, Latino lover to like the abusive Latino boyfriend. He would like yell at her and he became this abusive like guy, right? The implications were never that China could beat up Eddie Guerrero. That's just silly, you know what I mean? Yeah, China's tall and she's muscular, but Eddie Guerrero is short, but he is built like a fucking tank, you know what I'm saying? And nobody ever thought China can beat up Eddie Guerrero, Even though that was kind of like presented. But with respect to Rhea and Dom, like that's what we're told. We're told that Rhea Ripley can beat up Dominic Mysterio. So him interfering shouldn't be much of a problem. Damian Priest, who's like bigger than everyone combined, comes out and saves Rhea Ripley's bitch ass, right? She came out looking like a jobber, in my opinion, and as a result, I hated this segment. In addition, this segment was the first of many instances in this episode where the hater asked himself, is this a joke? Because this is the same thing we've seen again and again, man. Again and again, Rhea Ripley comes out and says, I'm going to beat up Liv Morgan. And then we have this segment where Liv Morgan and Dominic run away from her and Damian Priest. This is like the 5th week in a row that we've seen this. With Very slight variance to the point where it's not even worth mentioning, right? This is exactly what happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago when Rhea Ripley was like on the mic and she was talking to Dom and Liv, who were in the crowd, and Damian Priest came up and beat him up and they chased and they brawled and they left. Right? Same thing's happening. The match already happened, so it's time to move on. At least remove Dominic and Damian Priest as much as you can from this feud so you can actually have the feud and finally finish this. At this point, the long-term storytelling has gotten to the point where it's like, oh my God, can we fucking finish this so we can move on to the next thing? And that's never good. That means the story has run its course multiple times over. Speaking of, is this a joke and the story running its course multiple times over, we have Alpha Academy, who is probably the most consistent presence on Raw since WrestleMania. Like Tozawa and Otis wrestle every single week, and I love that, you know? They have a pretty decent match. It's them and Maxine versus American Made. The entire group minus Chad Gable, right? 6-man mixed gender match, right? Long story short, the bad guys win, right? This was kind of predicated and predicted, I should say, when Chad Gable, before the match, gave him a pep talk and slapped Julius Creed in the face in like a, you know, not in a disrespectful way, but in a go out there and get it done type of way. Basically, Chad Gable's like, yo, this is not acceptable, like we're better than this. So they go there and they beat up the good guys, right? The match wasn't really that great. It was okay, but the finish of the match was boring because basically Ivy Nile does this sick-ass dragon sleeper with her arm behind her back. It just looked devastating. But Maxine Dupree is like obviously going to take the submission. She's not on the level, or maybe she is, but she's not presented as being on Ivy Nile's level. After the match, Chad Gable says, you know what? I'm calling out the Wyatt Six. He's like, bring any 4 of you freaks at next week's Street Fight 8-man tag match, right? Now, here's the thing about this. It got me thinking, right? Like Chad Gable, nobody will ever suggest that Chad Gable is anything but, at most, a mid-carder. Mostly, he's an undercard guy, right? Now, if if Bo Dallas and the Wyatt Six are presented as this threatening force, right? Let's say we can compare them to Kane. You know, you would never have like Steve Blackman, right? Or Val Venus, or Godfather even, or D'Lo Brown come out there and say, Kane, I challenge you to a street fight. That would just be preposterous. Because what would happen the next week is Kane would destroy these people, just like he would in real life. He would destroy them in the match. You know what I mean? Because the idea is you're supposed to be afraid of Kane. But nobody's afraid of the Wyatt family. Or the Wyatt Six, I should say. You know what I mean? Chad Gable comes out there, even though he's gotten his ass kicked by them multiple times, and they've been bothering him for 2 months, he's still not afraid. So the Wyatt Six has completely failed in their goal. They wanted to intimidate him. They haven't, right? Despite the fact that Bo Dallas every week says, I'm going to take your soul, man. And you've signed your death warrant. And he speaks in riddles, but nobody gives a rat's ass. Now, obviously, the smart money is that the Wyatt Six are going to win next week. But they shouldn't. And even if they do, who cares? You know what I mean? After this, the new announcer who's replaced Michael Cole, who actually did a pretty decent job. He made a few mistakes, but I was really paying attention to him, right? Trying to catch these mistakes. So I don't know if he made more mistakes than normal, right? For example, at one point he thought that Isla Dawn later in the night, he thought that Isla Dawn was Alba Fire, or maybe he just mixed up who's the legal woman, you know? But immediately when he said that, I'm like, oh, he must not know who's who. But I don't know if that's true, you know what I mean? He made a few errors here and there, but for his first time, he did pretty well. The match ended, like I said, and then, Bo Dallas came out, and he cut another shitty promo. He stumbled his words in this one. He doesn't even know what he's saying at this point, right? It's like, it's like the Trump-Joe Biden debate, where Joe Biden, like, rambles on, and he says, we ended Medicare, and then Trump's like, I don't know what he just said. I don't think he knows what he just said. That's the impression that I got from this. Nothing special here. Boring and the same thing, repetitive again. Then we've got Zelina Vega who comes out. She looks different every time she comes out, which I hate because it's not consistent at all. And she's going to be wrestling Shayna Baszler. Long story short, Shayna Baszler hits the knee, which in my opinion should be called Finding Nemo. She hits the knee and pins her. That's really all you need to know about this. Lyra Valkyria comes out, tries to save her, but gets her ass beat 3-on-2. Sonya Deville gets the mic and basically says 2 things. Number 1, you know, we're here to kick ass, which is kind of like their shtick. And number 2, she really solidifies the fact that these women are a lesbian group. You know what I mean? Which I thought was nice that she did that, because she said something like, no man can take us home, right? Meaning that they're not interested in men. Even Zoe Stark, who I didn't know she was a lesbian, but apparently she is, or at least she's being portrayed as one. And she's like, and no woman can take us out, or something like that, right? It was a nice little tidbit of a promo, but what I did like about it is that they seemingly have moved on from Damage Control. Now, I don't want to be a hypocrite because I just said a minute ago that we need to move on from storylines and we don't want storylines to kind of overstay their welcome, right? So this was good. However, it does underpin and it does undermine the promo that Sonya Deville cut, because her promo was like, we're here to kick ass and nobody can stand up to us. Well, Damage Control just beat you last week. So what do you mean nobody can stand up to you? Damage Control can. So there you have it. That's already like a bad situation, but it is what it is. She can't work miracles. She's just one person. Overall, the Pure Jobber Collective, as I like to call them, is a step in the right direction. Like, it gives 3 women something to do when they otherwise would have nothing to do. And I have a great video coming up in the next few days that I filmed today about a faction that I've invented in my head. And that's going to be a great video. Probably one of the favorite videos that I've ever made. So I'll talk about that later, but it has nothing to do with these broads. But, the idea being that it's better to be in a faction than to do nothing. After the match, Lyra Valkyria and Zelina Vega are backstage and they're like, we need to solve this problem. And Lyra says, next week we're going to be in Calgary, so we'll get it handled. So basically they're going to get Natalya to team up with them next week, right? Meanwhile, the same exact segment happens between Damian and Rhea. And Rhea says, Damian basically says, I need a tag partner and I have no friends, right? Because nobody likes him, right? And Rhea says, I got someone in mind. And obviously, automatically, everyone that's watching realizes it's Jey Uso. This solidifies that Dom is the real face in this situation, right? Because Rhea Ripley was openly flirting with Jey Uso, and now she has him in her pocket, right? So Dominic was right to leave her bitch ass, right? Because Dominic is like, oh, wait a second, you're going to go after Jey Uso? She's like, that's nothing, don't worry about that. She's like laughing it off. Like giggling and laughing and shit at poor Dominic's face. And she expects Dominic to just acquiesce to this while she flirts with Jey Uso? Nah, motherfucks. Nah. Anyways, Rhea Ripley, noteworthy, she's in crutches now because her leg is fucked up, but it's not a serious injury, they keep telling us. Then CM Punk comes out. CM Punk cuts a promo about how he wants to go after Gunther. I like this, right? I enjoyed the fact that CM Punk is now willing to move on, but he gets attacked by a man in a hoodie. The new announcer says that's Drew McIntyre in a hoodie. This is right before Drew McIntyre takes off the hoodie to reveal that it's Drew McIntyre. Now, I'm not saying this was some big surprise and a big reveal, but nevertheless, the announcer pulled the rug up from under us, right? Otherwise, why is Drew McIntyre coming out in a hoodie? The idea is, who could this be? At least for a moment. And then you're like, oh shit, it's Drew McIntyre. This is still going on, right? Drew McIntyre lays a beating on CM Punk, takes the bracelet and rips it apart. Finally, we are free from this bracelet. And I kept thinking during this segment, well, maybe Rikishi should come out, take the pepper necklace, and eat it, the fat bastard. Anyways, despite all this, basically Drew McIntyre beats his ass for minutes after the commercial break as CM Punk is being taken to the ambulance. He beats him some more. But I made a video that I'm going to release tomorrow about Drew McIntyre, basically, right? And how, in my opinion, Drew McIntyre now is done for. I don't care about this segment because Drew McIntyre will never be anything more than a mid-carder to me after the beating that he took, the burial that he experienced at CM Punk's hands. There is a chance at rehabilitation, and this was a step in the right direction because Drew McIntyre basically is like, no, you don't just beat me and get away with it. But who knows where this is going to end. It's probably going to end with CM Punk winning anyways, so it's going to be another humiliation for Drew McIntyre. But whatever, for the time being, this was pretty decent. After this, what do we have after this? After this, we had Dominic Mysterio versus Dragon Lee versus Ilya Dragunov. The match starts, Dominic gets chased away by Damon Priest, which at the very least, it's consistent. If you're going to bore me with the storyline continuously, at least be consistent, and this was consistent, right? There's no reason why Damian Priest would tolerate Dominic Mysterio getting title shots. So he chases him off. This turns the match effectively into a one-on-one match. The match ends after Dragon Lee does 100 kicks to Ilya Dragunov that Ilya Dragunov no-sells. Dragon Lee's running towards Ilya, and Ilya hits the Torpedo Moscow. The new announcer doesn't understand that this is the finisher, because how could he? Either he knows it or he doesn't. He clearly didn't know it. But because the Torpedo Moscow is basically just Ilya Dragunov throwing himself into people, the announcer says, oh, Ilya Dragunov with a shoulder attack. Ilya pins the guy, and then it's a 1, 2, 3, and the announcer is like, and that's it. right? He was also surprised because he's like, wow, really? This is this guy's finishing move? It was a great organic moment from the new announcer. I really enjoyed the fact that the new announcer was like, this possibly can't be the finisher. It's impossible. It's such a shit move. You know, he does the H-bomb, which is pretty sick, but the Torpedo Moscow shouldn't even be a move. He just runs, and it's supposed to be like a headbutt, but he just throws himself, and whatever hits, right? The worst Torpedo Moscow ever was in the match with Trick Williams, where Ilya Dragunov wins, and like Trick Williams goes and does his jumping knee finisher, the trick shot, and Ilya does the Torpedo Moscow. They just collide in midair, and you have no idea who hit the finisher, right? Because they both hit the finisher, but only one of them hit it in kayfabe, right? It's like you don't know what the finisher is. Like, is the trick shot a knee to the face, a knee to the chest, a knee to the balls? Who knows? It's just this errant flying knee. Whatever it hits, it gets the pin. Same thing with the Torpedo Moscow. So that was a really, really shitty wrestling moment where both these guys just jump at each other, and apparently one wins from this, right? It's like, you know that spot where people do the double clothesline or the double cross body and they're both flattened out? It's like this, except one of them just no-sells it, you know? So for what it was, this match was decent, but Dragon Lee, or as I like to call him, DLC Dragon Lee, this guy's a DLC character. This guy's not a main player. The fact that he's even in contention for the IC title is laughable because this guy has never done anything in this company to deserve this. But nevertheless, at the very least, Ilya Dragunov wins. It doesn't matter. None of this matters because as we narrow down the field, Jey Uso's going to win, but nobody here is beating Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker is just too good. He's better than everybody that's involved in this Fatal 4-Way next week by a significant margin. So nobody cares about this entire tournament at all. Next up, we have Damage Control versus the Unholy Union, right? I briefly touched on this match before. Long story short, Unholy Union hits the gory, the gory slam, like Chavo's finisher, and, reverse STO flatliner, basically, combination on one of the Japanese broads. I think it was Io Sky, because Kairi Sane was, out arguing with Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill, who were there to, scout the competition or some nonsense, right? The match was sloppy. The match was boring. And honestly, all 6 of these women have amounted to absolutely nothing this year. Bianca Belair, of course, is main evented WrestleMania Night 1, which we all know doesn't count. And Jade Cargill should be a star, but look where she is now, right? The #1 draft pick for SmackDown on Night 2. She finds herself being a tag team partner with the other #1 draft pick, and basically they're feuding with jobbers that were supplemental draft jabrones. You know what I mean? Nobody cares at all about the women's tag titles. It's the second least important title in the company after the NXT Mid-Card Women's Championship. Think about what I just said. The NXT Mid-Card Women's Championship. It's like 3 modifiers that make sure that the person watching knows that this title is meaningless. First of all, it's NXT, which they don't even consider WWE anymore, right? Because later in the night, I'll talk about that later. So it's the NXT version of the women's title, which has never been presented as equal to the men's title, and it's the mid-card version of the women's title. So it's like the 5th most important women's title, right? And it's on NXT. So that's the least relevant. The women's tag team championships are a close second, but very close. You know what I mean? What do we have next? Next, we have another commercial where Rhea Ripley confirms that it is Jey Uso by saying yeet. The whole crowd was saying yeet, everybody knows. Gunther comes out and he cuts a boring, zero charisma promo about how he beat the best version of Randy Orton. Anybody that watched that match was bored half to death, and everybody knows that this is not the best Randy Orton. This is the biggest and most bloated Randy Orton. But like I said in one of the videos that's coming out tomorrow, there was a clip that I ran into. It's Randy Orton when he was the champ, and he was bald, prime 2009 Randy Orton, and he just looked like a fucking killer. Good looking, not bloated, right? You could see, you could see his jaw. He had a jawline, right? He just looked like a fucking skeleton, you know what I mean? But in a good way, with muscles, and just like a freak athlete, that Randy Orton is peak wrestler. You know what I mean? That's one of the best, I'm gonna do a video one day of the best versions of each wrestler. And that version of Randy Orton is not only the best version of Randy Orton, but it's one of the best versions of any wrestler of all time. So Gunther saying that 44-year-old Randy Orton that, is 290 pounds and is bloated and can barely move, that this is the best Orton is just ridiculous. This is the same Orton that couldn't beat, Logan Paul, but whatever, it is what it is. Sami Zayn comes out and interrupts him, and he says that just like Gunther, Macho Man, Bret Hart, The Rock, Triple H, Stone Cold, they used the Intercontinental title as a stepping stone to get to the world title, right? And he says that he's going to be the next guy to do that. Emphasis on the word next, right? Gunther doesn't understand this, apparently. He gets the mic and he says, "You're not one of those guys." Yeah, no shit. That's exactly what Sami Zayn was saying. He's saying he's not one of those guys, but he would like to be one of those guys. Gunther basically says, "So you want a title shot?" No, right? And he walks away. Sami Zayn says, "I'm going to get it whether you like it or not," right? And he also points to the fact that he's the only guy to beat Gunther in WWE, which means that the people that beat him in NXT, like Ilya Dragunov, don't count, right? They just don't count. It's as simple as that, which is fair. You know, let's not get it twisted, right? Then we have a segment between Braun Breaker and Jey Uso, right? And this segment tells you all you need to know about wrestling. You have Braun Breaker standing next to Jey Uso, and like all I could think about here is like if Jey Uso, if this was real, let's say, and for some reason Braun Breaker decided he just wants to beat the shit out of Jey Uso, nothing could stop him. He would just murder him right there if he wanted to, right? It's not even close, right? It's not even close, the presence that these two guys have, right? And like Braun Breaker is just a freak athlete. He really is, in my opinion, a Brock Lesnar level athlete. But he's smaller than Brock Lesnar, and he doesn't have the presence of Brock Lesnar. But to be fair, few men are bigger than Brock Lesnar, and even fewer men have the presence of Brock Lesnar. So he's still good, in my opinion, right? At some point, we have a segment between Cucky Kingston and Adam Pearce. And Cucky Kingston says, Judgment Day hasn't defended the titles in 2 months. And Adam Pearce says, "You think I don't know that? I've been trying to get in contact with him." What are you... Adam Pearce is retarded. There's no other word to describe him. This guy is the worst authority figure in the history of authority figures. He deserves his own video. This guy just lets people die left and right, right? He was in charge last week when Bronson Reed destroyed Braun Strowman. He was in charge also when the Wyatt Six destroyed like half the crew. He was in charge now when the Judgment Day is not defending their titles in 2 months, apparently. Back in the day, in the Attitude Era, there was like a stipulation. If you don't defend it once a month, you get stripped of the titles. So they made sure that at the very least, on some random episode of Heat, they would defend the titles, right? So there you have it. But this is not that. This is basically just an idiot walking around pretending he's the boss. Like, think about it. All the bad things that have happened in kayfabe on Raw, he's done nothing to address them whatsoever, right? And as a matter of fact, like the Wyatt family, the Wyatt Six, after their little segment, the new announcer says, Bo Dallas' sister said this was like a great moment. It's like, what? Bo Dallas has a sister? What the hell is this? Like, Bo Dallas is supposed to be like a retard who thinks he's Uncle Howdy. Why are we talking about his real life sister? No, motherfucks. No, keep true to your character. In addition, Bronson Reed, for whatever reason, and they say he's ill. Hopefully he's okay and it's nothing serious, but it sounded like he was just sick, like actually sick. Maybe he's got the flu or something. Hopefully it's not serious, because sometimes these things get worrisome, you know what I mean? Just like Bray Wyatt. He was sick and then one day he just died, you know what I mean? So hopefully, I don't think it's gonna happen to Bronson Reed, because there's no reason to think that, but hopefully he's fine. As a result of the fact that he's gone from an illness, Braun Strowman, who got his ass destroyed by Bronson Reed, takes over his spot and ends up winning the match against, who was it? Against Sheamus and someone else. I forget the other person completely. But he wins because Pete, I think it was fucking Ludwig Kaiser, right? Basically, Pete Dunne comes up and attacks Sheamus with the shillelagh. This is still going on. Another moment where the haters said, wow, is this some sort of joke? Like, this is still going on? Like, when is it going to end? You know, well, like, at some point, Drew McIntyre and CM Punk are going to be tired of each other? Like, what's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, it's over. You know, like, you can keep going forever, but there has to end at some point. So that happened. Braun basically, what's it called? Braun Strowman wins, and that's just how that goes down. I mean, there's nothing really crazy, but, you know, Braun Strowman wins, right? Of course he's going to win. Like, the two other guys are Sheamus, who, you know, actually Sheamus versus Braun Breaker would be a great match, but they're not going to push Sheamus right now, especially if he's going to be tangled up with Pete Dunne. And Ludwig Kaiser is just a jobber. Like, I like him, but he's a jobber. You know what I mean? Like, we got to be honest about these things. Basically, back from the commercial, Pete Dunne does an interview, and he says that he's sending Sheamus a message from an old friend, and now he's going to go to beat up Trick Williams in NXT. He already did. He already beat up Trick Williams. Trick Williams is done as far as I'm concerned. I haven't really watched NXT, but as far as I understand, the last match Trick Williams had was him losing clean to Pete Dunne. So why he has the job is beyond me. I don't really give a rat's ass though. So that happens, right? Damian Priest and Jey Uso come out, and it's them against Judgment Day's Finn Balor and the #1 stunner, JD McDonough, right? The match is your typical JD Finn Balor match, and that's kind of like the issue with this match. Like, while they have not defended their titles, they're doing other more important shit, basically, right? Like, they're tag team champions for no reason, because they're part of a program that's far more important than the tag team title belts, as evidenced by the fact that they're continuously participating in the program, but are not continuously defending the tag team title belts, right? The match goes haywire when Liv Morgan interferes for the 19th time. Then Rhea Ripley comes out in crutches, and Liv Morgan goes to punk her out. She's like, you can't even walk. Rhea Ripley hits her with the crutch, and then this allows Liv Morgan to just roll away and eventually run away from a limp Rhea Ripley. I don't know why she ran away, because she's the one who came up to get in Rhea Ripley's face. But apparently, even a one-legged Rhea Ripley is intimidating, right? Rhea Ripley's bouncing all over the emotional scale of this episode. First, she's angry. Then she's smiling like an idiot. Then she's upset that she got injured. Then she's smiling like an idiot again, right? She has these like overly emotional moments. I understand that her character is like, she's like this crazy broad, but like, it's not really her character anyways, but it doesn't fly well, right? It's like Samoa Joe. Remember Samoa Joe back in TNA, where he would just start cutting a promo and he'd be like, you know, I want a world title shot. And Sting, I'm gonna kill you for it. You know, like all of a sudden, like he would go from being like a calm dude and he would crescendo immediately to like being angry for no reason, right? Rhea Ripley's the same, and it doesn't work. The same way it didn't work for her, it doesn't work for Samoa Joe, because to be honest, neither of them are very intimidating, if I'm being 100% like honest, right? If you compare, for example, how intimidating, let's say, Braun Breaker is or Roman Reigns is, or like obviously like Lashley, you know, Booker T, Stone Cold, like the real people that are intimidating, that's not even on the same caliber, but you know, it's just, they're not intimidating. So that happens. Eventually, as a result of Liv Morgan being gone, this allows Damian Priest to tag in, beat the shit out of everybody. He tries to hit the Razor's Edge on Finn, but he is stopped by JD McDonough. Then Finn gets speared by Jay, who's not the legal man. Jay goes back to the corner. Priest hits the Razor's Edge on fucking JD McDonough, tags in Uso. Uso does the splash, and they celebrate, and Uso's like kind of like checking out Rhea Ripley, right? So Dom was right the whole time. That's it. That's the whole show. It wasn't good. I hated every moment of it. There was a lot of stuff that goes beyond the scope of this review that I also hated, right? Like, so for example, there was a period, luckily I had DVR'd this shit, so like I could skip the, you know, commercials, if you will, right? But there was a period where it was like commercial, entrance, commercial, entrance, commercial, beginning of the match, 3 minutes into the match, another commercial, like straight up, where it's like a 25-minute period where you're seeing 2 minutes of wrestling, you know? And all you're seeing is other shit, like entrances. You're not even seeing backstage segments. So this episode of Raw, complete disaster. I didn't like it at all, you know? Like, I will say there were some positives, like at the very least, Gunther, CM Punk, and to a lesser degree, the new mid-carder, Drew McIntyre, at least were there, right? At least were they didn't, of course they didn't wrestle. You know, you're not going to see CM Punk wrestling on Raw. You're not going to see Gunther wrestling on Raw. Who do you think you are to deserve these mid-carders wrestling in front of you on Raw? But at least they were there. And nowadays, we have to just kind of accept that, right? We have to know that these people aren't wrestling on Raw. Roman Reigns isn't wrestling on SmackDown. You know what I mean? But you might see him, and that's a big deal now, right? John Cena's not wrestling on Raw probably ever again, or SmackDown ever again. And he's just going to like show up, cut a promo, and leave. Just like The Rock, just like everybody else. Now everybody feels like fucking Hulk Hogan, except here's the problem. None of these guys can draw 1/100th of what Hulk Hogan drew. Hulk Hogan moving his arm to his ear, his hand to his ear, is more of a draw than everyone on this show combined in their entire careers. So there you have it, cucks. I hated this with a burning passion. Now, tomorrow, look out for some cool videos. One of them is releasing, I think, at 1 or at 2 p.m., because I already like uploaded that shit. But I didn't want to release it today because there wasn't enough time. Because I got around to making videos a little bit later today, but I made like 4, right? So I wanted to give people some break, some reprieve from the hater. So there's 2 videos tomorrow. I think they're both great. And then I think the day after that is my favorite video. It's going to be about the haters' idea of WWE having an African stable. So if you've made it this far into this video, definitely look forward to my African stable video, because I think I have solved a lot of problems with my new invention of this African stable. We're still looking for a name, you know. But personally, I think that, and I stumbled upon this, like in one of the videos tomorrow, you'll hear me kind of mentioning this, then I did a video on it, right? So like, you'll hear me stumbling upon it, and you're gonna think to yourself, wow, the hater is so great. He just came up with a better story than Triple H ever has. You know what I'm saying? That's what you're gonna think, cucks. And with that being said, see y'all tomorrow. I hope some of you at least enjoyed this episode of Raw, although I highly, 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 highly doubt it, cucks.